Good morning, boys and girls. I'm Eleanor Hawkins, and welcome to Telestory Time. I want to read you this poem. In the week when Christmas comes. This is the week when Christmas comes. Let every pudding burst with plums, and every tree bear dolls and drums. In the week when Christmas comes. Let every hall have boughs of green, with berries growing in between. In the week when Christmas comes. Let every doorstep have a song, sounding the dark street along. In the week when Christmas comes. Let every steeple ring a bell with a joyful tale to tell. In the week when Christmas comes. Let every night put forth a star to show us where the heavens are. In the week when Christmas comes. And you know, we are in the week when Christmas comes right now. Our very first story that I've chosen is in this very large book, and it's entitled The Animals' Merry Christmas. And inside, I want to read you this story. It's about the terrible teddy bear. Now, terrible teddy bear did not look like a terrible bear at all. He was the brown kind of teddy bear, just the size to take to bed. And he had a funny little squeak and a shiny black eyes and a bit of a smile. But he was a terrible teddy, just the same. When Santa Claus, who had made this teddy and who had said, "He is the very best bear I've ever made," "This terrible teddy bear," he said the first Christmas morning at breakfast, "this terrible teddy bear climbed out of my pack last night. He hid under the seat of my sleigh. When I got back home, there he was, back home too, and not wherever I meant to leave him for some good child." "Dear, dear," said Mrs. Santa Claus, and she was still saying, "Dear, dear," 5 Christmases later. Because every Christmas Eve, terrible teddy bear climbed out of the toy pack. Every Christmas Eve he hid in a different place, and every Christmas morning he was back home at the North Pole. On the 5th Christmas morning, Santa made up his mind to do something about terrible Teddy. He hurried into his workshop and looked at the letters in the basket marked "No." The basket was chock full of letters from people who didn't deserve presents and did not get presents. Santa Claus always felt very sad when he looked at those letters. Just the same, he sat down and read them all. He read straight through lunch and halfway through supper, and then he jumped up holding a crumpled letter in one red mitten. "Here's a letter from someone more terrible than Terrible Teddy," he said. "Here is a letter from Terrible Tommy, who says I won't all day long, and eats nothing but candy and bubble gum, and besides he never will go to bed at night." "Dear, dear," said Mrs. Santa Claus, "you can't ever take him a present." "Oh, yes, I can," Santa laughed. "I'm going to his house and make a special trip, and I'm going to give him Terrible Teddy." "Dear, dear," Mrs. Santa Claus said. "Dear, dear, dear." But by the time the reindeer were harnessed, the sleigh was out of the barn and Santa was driving over the rooftops on Christmas night. He was driving one-handed at that. In his other hand he held Terrible Teddy, tight as tight. Terrible Teddy certainly didn't look terrible now. He was trying very hard to squeak, "Oh, please don't give me to Terrible Tommy." But Santa held him too tightly. Before long, the sleigh stopped with a jerk. It stopped on the roof of Tommy's home. All the lights were out. Everyone was asleep, everyone, that is, except Terrible Tommy. He sat by the hearth, rubbing his eyes and blowing his nose. He sobbed a bit too. "Santa Claus didn't come to me," he cried. "He didn't bring me a thing, not even some ashes and switches, not even some old worn patched breeches, not even a horn that wouldn't blow, not even anything. Oh, and I wanted a teddy bear, even an old one, a brown and plushy one, and nice to hold one, with shiny eyes and a fuzzy head, the kind that's the side for taking to bed. Santa Claus up on the roof heard Terrible Tommy. He blew some ashes down to make Tommy close his eyes, and when Tommy did, whisk, down the chimney came Santa. Whisk, up he went again, leaving Terrible Teddy behind. Away went the sleigh with its bells all jingling. Terrible Tommy opened his eyes, and there, right in front of him, sat Terrible Teddy. "Santa did come," cried Tommy. "He made a special trip just for me, and he brought me the nicest, softest, best kind of teddy bear in the whole world." He picked up Terrible Teddy and hugged him tightly. Teddy liked that so much that he hugged back. Tommy liked that so much that he felt good from head to toe. And right then, all the Terrible Teddy went straight out of Tommy. It went out of Teddy, too. Up the stairs they went, both together, both together. They climbed into Tommy's bed. Both together they went sound asleep. And they looked just like a good little boy sleeping and a good teddy bear sleeping, too. And you know, they had a wonderful Christmas day the next day, loving and hugging each other. That is the story of Terrible, Terrible Teddy. And now, boys and girls, stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, I want to talk to you about our Christmas at our home. Carol and I were married 65 years ago, and we both loved Christmas, and we started collecting then. And our very first present from my parents on our first Christmas was a beautiful Holy Family, a whole nativity set. And you know, we started enjoying that first Christmas, and we've enjoyed it all 65 years since. It's very special because we leave it out all year, and we celebrate the birthday of baby Jesus. And then, boys and girls, as we have become older in the last few years, we have decided to celebrate Christmas all the year round because it's so much trouble to unpack all the ornaments and all the figurines, and then at the end of the month, pack them all up again. And as we've gotten older, we have left them out, and we enjoyed all the year. Now, we have several different collections, and one is a beautiful Christmas tree in my library in our home. And there we have a very tall Christmas tree. And years ago, when our little granddaughter, Leslie, came over, and we decided to decorate the whole tree with little miniature porcelain dolls. So the old tree has many porcelain dolls on it. And on the very top, we have Barbie the angel that Leslie loves so much. And then, after we enjoyed the tree for several years, Leslie and I decided to make it a holiday tree. So we spread a garden for January and put snowflakes. A second a garland, and it was hearts for Valentine's Day. And then another garland for March was shamrocks. And we continued through the year. And that is our decorated tree in my library at home now. We enjoyed it all year round. And then we have a Santa Claus collection. Of course, I love Santa Claus. This is my favorite day of the year. And I have collected all kinds of Santa Clauses from all over the world. And I have very old Santa Clauses back to the 1800s, a marvelous collection that we enjoy. And then, boys and girls, today in my library at home, I have a whole corner of teddy bears, and they are all reading. And do you know what they're reading? They're reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And so I brought some of them today, and they're our guests here today on Telestory Time. And you can see they're all having a good time reading. And boys and girls, let me remind you, it can be so much fun to collect something at Christmas, and then you can enjoy it all the rest of your life. I hope you enjoyed looking at my teddy bear collection and enjoy seeing them read as they read the night before Christmas.
'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas would soon be there.
And so now let me remind you, during your holidays, be sure and visit your public library, any of the libraries in the Craven, Pamlico, Carteret Regional Library System. You can check out a good Christmas book and some New Year's books. Have a good time using your very own library card. And now stay tuned, and we're going to have another Christmas story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, get very comfortable and ready to listen to the story, The Elves and the Shoemaker. There was once a shoemaker who, through no fault of his own, had become so poor that he had only enough leather left for one pair of shoes. In the evening he cut out the leather, intending to make it up in the morning. Then he said his prayers and lay quietly down to sleep. In the morning he sat down to work, but behold, the pair of shoes was already made, and there they stood upon the table. The poor man was amazed and took the shoes into his hand to look at them more closely. They were so neatly sewn that not a stitch was out of place, as if they had been made for a prize. Presently, a customer came in, and as he was very pleased with the shoes, he paid more than usual. With the money, the shoemaker was now able to buy leather for 2 pairs of shoes. By evening, he had his leather shaped out. When he arose the next morning, he was ready to work with fresh spirit. But just as before, the shoes were standing finished on the table. He did not want buyers either. The 2 men came in immediately who paid him so well that he bought material for 4 more pairs of shoes. Early the next morning, he found the 4 pairs of shoes finished, and so it continued. When he cut out at evening, was finished in the morning. This went on until the shoemaker was soon a well-to-do man. One evening not long before Christmas, when he had cut out the usual quantity, he said to his wife, "How would it be if we stayed up all night to see who it is that helps us?" His wife was willing and lighted a candle. Then they hid themselves behind some clothes hanging in the corner of the room. As soon as it was midnight, 2 little elves came in and sat down on the shoemaker's table. They picked up the cut-out leather and began stitching, sewing, and hammering so swiftly and lightly that the shoemaker could not believe his eyes. They did not stop until the shoes were finished, and then they ran swiftly away. The following morning the wife said, "These little elves have made us rich, and we must show our gratitude. They have very little clothing, and they must be clothed. I will make a little shirt and coat and trousers and knit some stockings for each of them, and you will make them each a pair of shoes." The husband agreed, and one evening when all was ready, instead of cut-out leather, they left the presents on the table, and then they hid to watch the results. At midnight, the elves came in, skipping about and eager to go to work. When they saw no leather, but the charming little clothes, they were so astonished and delighted. They quickly put on their new outfits, and smoothing them down, sang, "Smart and natty boys are we, shoemakers will no longer be." And so they went on, hopping and jumping over the stools and chairs, and at last out of the door. They did not come again, but the shoemaker fared well in all, and he understood, and he lived happily to the end of his days. And that is the story of the elves and the shoemakers. And now, boys and girls, stay tuned, and we'll be back with another story in just a moment. And now, boys and girls, from the Tall Book of Christmas. the Christmas cake. It was a joyful day for the McMullen children when Mrs. McMullihan made Christmas cake. They were raisins to seed and eggs to beat and pans to scrape. Every one of the children, from the oldest to the youngest, helped to stir the batter when the good things were mixed together. Oh, mix it and stir it and taste, for everything's in it and nothing to waste. And everyone's helped, even baby, to make the nice brown sugary Christmas cake, said Mrs. McMulligan, as she poured the batter into the cake pan. The baker who lived at the corner was to bake the Christmas cake, so Joseph, the oldest boy, made haste to carry it to him. All the other children followed him, and together they went, oh so carefully, out of the front door, down the sidewalk, straight to the shop where the baker was waiting. The baker's face was so round and so jolly that Mrs. McMulligan's children thought he must look like Santa Claus. He could bake the whitest bread and the lightest cake, and as soon as the children spied him, they began to call, "The cake is all ready, 'tis here in the pan. Now bake it, good baker, as fast as you can." "No, no," said the baker, "'twould be a mistake to hurry in baking the Christmas cake. I'll not bake it fast, I'll not bake it slow. My little round clock on the wall there will show how long I must watch and how long I must bake the nice brown sugary Christmas cake." The little round clock hung on the wall above the oven. Its face was bright and its tick was merry, and it was busy night and day, telling the baker when to sleep and when to eat and when to do his baking. It was just striking 10, and it seemed to the McGulligan children very plainly to say, "'Tis just the right time for the baker to bake the nice brown sugary Christmas cake." The oven was ready, and the baker made haste to put the cake in. "Ho, ho," he cried gaily, "now isn't this fun? 'Tis 10 by the clock, and the baking's begun. And tickety, tickety, when it strikes 1, if nothing should hinder, the cake will be done." Then the McMulligan children ran home to tell their mother what he had said, and the baker went on with his work. Now it was the day before Christmas, and a great many people came to his shop to buy pies and cakes. But no matter how busy he was waiting on them, he never forgot the McMulligan's cake. And every time he looked at the clock, it reminded him to peep into the oven. So well did he watch it, and so carefully did he bake it, that the cake was done on the stroke of 1, just as he had promised. He had scarcely taken it out of the oven when the shop door flew open, and in came the McMulligan children, every one of them saying, "The clock has struck 1, the clock has struck 1. We waited to hear it, and is the cake done?" When they saw it, they thought it was the nicest, brownest, spiciest cake that ever was baked in the baker's oven. The baker himself said it was a beautiful cake, and if you had been at the McMulligans on Christmas Day, I am sure you would have thought so too. Now Joseph carried it, walking very slowly and carefully, and all the other children followed him out of the baker's shop, down the sidewalk, straight home. There Mrs. McMulligan was waiting for them. She was smiling at them from the window, and when they spied her, they all began to call, "Hurrah for Mama, she surely can bake the nicest and spiciest Christmas cake. Hurrah for the baker, hurrah for the fun, hurrah for our Christmas cake, now it is done." And that is the story of the Christmas cake. And now I see I have time enough to read you this poem about a mouse. Mouse Christmas. Oh, the world's bits the folks drop as they go, cooking and baking and hurrying so. Citron and raisins and powdery spice, sugar and currants, it's nice to be mice. In this big busy house with Christmas ahead, we find tinsel and ribbon to hide in our bed, and shavings of chocolate and sugary rind, of sweet spicy orange. And sometimes we find crisp peppermint chips, all striped red and white, and ginger snap crumbles, a wonderful sight. We'll fill up our stockings when Christmas Eve comes with the savory bite and the wonderful crumbs, citron and raisins, and sugar and spice. Oh, just before Christmas, it's so nice to be mice. And that is the story of the Mouse Christmas. And now I have time enough to remind you that a book is a present. You can open it again and again. And I hope you boys and girls have included a Christmas book or a book that you can read all year long that is your favorite to add to your Christmas list. And boys and girls, I see it's time for us to remind you to be sure and visit your public library this week on your Christmas vacation. The library is waiting there with having special Christmas stories and Christmas specials all during the Christmas week. And be sure and visit your Craven, Pamlico, Carteret Regional Libraries. They're all waiting to wish you a Merry Christmas. And so now it's time for us to close our book of stories for this morning. But we'll be back next Saturday morning on Christmas Eve to read you Christmas stories. We hope to see you then. Till then, this is Eleanor Hawkins saying bye-bye for Telestory Time.